So thank you so much for coming today. We're recording it so that we can share it on social media and through email. So welcome to board and staff and volunteers and supporters, everybody who's watching this video. We are so grateful to our partners at Pima County Interfaith for their support today. We have Judy Kagi and Leah Sanville-Weiss here, and they're going to be presenting the tax information, and I'll be presenting all the information about how you can get involved. And I'll be watching the chat throughout. So if you have a question, you can throw it in the chat and I'll bring it up during one of our question pauses. And then all of the resources that are mentioned in today's training, I'll be sharing that with you all via email. So let's start with the basics. We have a very short video here that will briefly explain the issue before we jump into the details. Oops, I did that wrong.
Prop 208, the Associated Press now putting this one in the yes column.
The voters of Arizona not only see the need, but they found a revenue stream to permanently dedicate targeted funding to every school in the state.
Well, now state leaders are taking much of that money away. It is all part of the $12.8 billion budget the governor just signed.
So those are the basics. And just a what do you call it? Disclaimer that as a 501c3, we need to stay nonpartisan. You may have noticed the mention of the Republican Party in that video. That's because this budget passed with only Republican votes. So not being partisan, that's just a statement of what actually happened. So I'd like to preface this presentation by saying that we had 90 days from the end of the legislative session to get 118,000 file-in signatures. So the clock has been ticking since June 30th already, and the deadline is September 28th. So with that stressful little tidbit, I'll turn it over to Judy to dig into more of the details.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judy Kagi, a leader with Pima County Interfaith. And for those of you that haven't worked with Pima County Interfaith or PCI before, I'm going to share a thumbnail sketch of who we are. Pima County Interfaith is comprised of a variety of faith communities and nonprofit organizations. We have a 3-decade record of training community leaders and developing relationships with elected officials. We intentionally work across the lines of religious beliefs, political philosophies, ethnicities, and economic levels that divide our communities. And we're proud to be an active partner in the Arizona Interfaith Network. We've joined with allies across the state to circulate petitions to provide voters with the opportunity to vote on 3 pieces of legislation related to the budget passed this year. When we're successful, these bills will be placed on hold and voters will be able to decide whether to accept or reject the bills.
Judy, we're not seeing the
Now,
PowerPoint.
before we get started, oh, you're not, okay.
Oh, it didn't come up. Sorry about that. I'm doing the share screen. And there we go. There.
Okay, well, we haven't gotten beyond that first and best in Arizona.
Okay.
So we're good.
We got it.
Before we get started, some housekeeping details. Please keep your audio muted during the presentation. And if you have questions during the presentation, as Kate suggested, please put them in the chat. And we'll pause after each section for a brief discussion and address your questions. Okay, we're going to explain what these three tax provisions are and why they're harmful to the people of Arizona. As we go through the explanation of these three bills, please pay attention, as you will need to be able to explain them should people ask you when you're gathering signatures. Near the end of our presentation, we can go over some helpful talking points for your use, and Kate will finish with training for gathering signatures. So let's start with the provision that has to do with going to a flat income tax. Up until now, we've had a progressive personal income tax structure with graduated brackets. Higher earners paid proportionately more in income taxes. And as you can see here, what the rates were for in 2020, that is before this change, for single and married filers. You'll see that in the top box there. That will be replaced by a flat tax of 20% across the board, except for some who will pay 1%, but we'll talk about that later when we get to the other tax bills. When a flat tax is used for income tax collection, it means that everyone pays at the same rate. This flat tax is a huge change for the state. It actually changes our current income tax structure from a progressive structure to a regressive structure, with the drop in what people who I guess we would consider fairly wealthy, will end up paying afterwards. So let's talk about that a little bit more. When fully implemented, the flat tax recently passed in Arizona will tax people at all incomes at a rate of 2.5%, but the Arizona law will phase in over a couple of years with 2 tax brackets versus the 5 brackets we had before. And when revenues reach a designated threshold, then it will change to the 2.5% rate. Now that we know what the flat tax is, we'll examine who and how it will affect taxpayers in Arizona. But first, let's begin with a little context. It's useful to understand the basics of revenue and expenditure in Arizona to better understand the effects of the flat tax. Currently, individuals foot the bill, with the majority of state revenues coming from sales tax and income tax. Surprisingly, corporations pay little towards the state's revenues. In Arizona, we have a particularly high sales tax. That makes our economy more volatile. When the economy weakens, so do income and sales. So state revenues will fall just when state services are most needed to cushion the effects of a downturn. The cyclical nature of the economy means we will see revenue reductions periodically. The total general fund for last year was $11.8 billion. And I want you to hold on to this $11.8 billion number, because we're going to show you how these new tax laws decimate the general fund over time. So this shows you how Arizona spends those general fund dollars. Except for the Department of Corrections, think prisons, these services have not received significantly greater funding for quite a while. The real problem is that the pie itself keeps getting smaller when taxes are cut and revenues decrease. When the economy has a downturn, there simply won't be enough money in the pot to adequately fund the state's needs. Since Arizona must balance its budget, spending cuts are then required. And as we learned during the Great Recession, since roughly 3/4 of the budget goes to education and healthcare, when cuts happen, those areas and our children are hurt the most. We're still paying the price, as education funding was never restored fully after the Great Recession. And we're still not fully funding programs like kids' care, healthcare coverage. We need to remember this lesson. And this chart shows what happened to the pie over time. The graph shows how our state revenues have decreased with respect to income over the last 30 years. This downward trend reflects when tax cuts took place. Prior to 1991, we were paying between $45 and $55 in income taxes for every $1,000 of our income. You might be wondering what that Prop 108 in the middle of this slide is. That's the voter-approved law under which tax cuts only need a simple majority vote to pass, while a 2/3 vote of the legislature is required to raise them. So with frequent tax cuts, including cuts enacted every year but one since 1992, we are now down to about $35 for $1,000 of personal income. State revenues have declined by more than $5 billion when adjusted for inflation over this time period. You may have heard our governor say that we have a $2 billion revenue surplus, but that's because we haven't paid our bills. And we got a one-time cash infusion from the federal government for pandemic relief. It's kind of like you inherited money this year, and you act like you're going to inherit it every year. As a result of recurring tax cuts and complicated first by the Great Recession and then the pandemic, Arizona has a significant financial backlog. Education at all levels has taken a big hit, but it isn't the only area with cuts. Roads, especially in rural areas, get worse and worse. Rest areas close, never to reopen. But it isn't just rest areas. Parks are poorly maintained and raise user fees to compensate. And we all remember the long delays in the media from hearing media reports about paying out unemployment benefits during the pandemic. That was really due to inadequately funded data systems and insufficient staffing in the responsible state agencies. In this tumultuous time, Governor Ducey once again revived the flat tax idea, and the legislature passed the largest tax cut we've ever had. You should know that in 1862, President Abraham Lincoln abolished the flat income tax at the federal level in favor of a progressive system in order to avoid undue hardship on the less well-off. Yet, here we are again. The result, when the flat tax is fully phased in, is an estimated revenue loss to the state of $1.9 billion, or 16% of that $11.8 billion in the total general fund that we referred to earlier. At some point, our temporary surplus will go away. It is temporary after all. At that point, we will face a structural deficit. Now, the governor believes increased revenues from other sources will compensate for the loss in revenue. We disagree. Remember, it will take a supermajority in both houses of the legislature to reverse these cuts, and it will be difficult, if not impossible, to make up that money from other sources. It's like giving your kid $5 a week for lunch money, and then suddenly only giving him $4 and telling him he'll just have to go without lunch on Friday. Is a flat tax more fair? After all, everybody pays at the same rate. And of course, if you make more money, you will pay more. Let's examine this idea more closely. Let's recall that Arizona gets most of its revenues from income and sales tax. The income tax structure has until now been progressive, as we noted before. But look what happens when we consider all forms of taxes, including sales taxes. It's actually already a regressive tax structure, even before we consider the effect of a flat tax. This chart shows how unequally people share in producing these revenues in 2018. Arizona taxpayers with the lowest income paid the highest percentage of their income in state and local taxes. All state taxes included sales and income. So if you're part of the poorest 20%, you paid $12.95 for every 100 you earn. And if you were in the top 1%, you paid $5.91 for every 100 you earned. Let's look at that another way. If you're in the top 1%, you get to keep $94 of your $100. In the bottom, you only got to keep $87. Thus, our combined taxing system hasn't really been progressive at all. The flat income tax will make the problem much worse. By decreasing the income bracket for richer Arizonans, they will pay an even smaller percentage of their income in taxes. Now let's look in more detail at how the benefits of the flat tax are distributed. The governor insists that everyone who pays state income taxes will get a tax break under the flat tax. He's right. But how much do people at different income levels benefit? According to the estimate by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee in a memorandum dated May 26th of this year, individual families making under $50,000 would pay between $1 to $39 less per year under the flat tax, while families making $5 million a year would get a tax break amounting to a whopping $350,000 less per year. Does that sound reasonable to you? These are some examples of essential workers and how much they benefit from the flat tax. These dollar amounts are the approximate total tax savings for these groups. Now, the state cannot spend money it doesn't have. Remember, the Arizona Constitution requires a supermajority in both houses to raise taxes. So once these cuts go into effect, they're virtually irreversible unless the makeup of the state legislature radically changes. The only way to stop this is if the cuts never go into effect in the first place. And that's why these referendums are so critical. So, in summary, we can see that the wealthiest Arizonas will benefit most from the changes to a flat tax. Lower income families will pay an even higher amount of their incomes in taxes. And the state's ability to respond to vital needs will erode even further. Now let's take a break here to get your reactions and answer your questions. Over to you, Kate.
All right, Leah, would you stop screen sharing for this part?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, that's a lot of information. Let's stretch. Do it. I'm watching you. I see you, Robin. Good, because there's a lot more information coming. It can get really heavy. And let's go to the chat. Tell us what's sticking with you. And if you have questions, throw them in the chat now. What's sticking with you? Awesome. Okay, got some good ones coming in here. So Lizzie says that those out of every $100 are going to stick with me. Yeah, so showing how regressive the tax structure is. Lizzie, did you mean about who's going to benefit from the flat tax, or how the tax structure already is?
So saying, yeah, talking about who's going to benefit. And so like at this income bracket, you get to keep 87 of the $100 you earned.
Yeah.
Whereas at this bracket, etc.
Yeah, great. Gina says the fact that it will be almost impossible to reverse these if they're allowed to pass. And that's again, that's on purpose. They passed a law. A law was passed to make it so that Tax cuts pass really easily. To undo them requires a supermajority. Robin says unbalanced wealth, unbalanced distribution of savings. Aaron asks to see that slide with the out of every $100 information. We'll show that again. Lupita says the wealthy are benefiting. Manuel says the ones who make less pay more. It's very unbalanced.
So here's that slide, I think. Or here's the one from 2018. Didn't change, we don't know exactly how much it changed, but it certainly didn't get better in 2020 and 2019.
Yeah, it's a talking point among people who push this tax cut. It's a talking point that our income tax system is progressive, but like Judy mentioned, when you combine it with our other taxes, our tax structure relies heavily on sales tax and things that everybody has to pay. And so the people at the lower end of the income spectrum are paying a higher percentage of their taxes, of their income. Any questions before we go on? Alrighty.
Okay. So thank you, Kate and Judy, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Leah Sandwell Weiss. I'm a deacon at St. Philip's in the Hills Episcopal Church and a leader of Pima County Interfaith. So Judy just covered the flat tax and what it is, and that's the first of these three new tax laws, which will negatively affect the general fund and thus all the programs that are funded through it. But what about education? After all, over 1.6 million voters voted to pass the Invest in Ed initiative, Prop 208, just last November. Won't this provide extra funding for education? And that's where the other two tax laws come in. But first, a quick review of our current education funding system. Despite a recent increase in education funding, not including the Prop 208 funds, spending cuts over many years have left per pupil spending in Arizona as a little over $8,200. In comparison, the national average is over $12,600 per pupil. That puts us at number 49th in the nation in per pupil spending. That is why Invest in Ed and its allies like PCI fought hard to get Prop 208 on the ballot, and why voters approved it last November. It's now the law, and by law, our Constitution, it cannot be altered to change the will of the voters. So to remind everybody, here's what Prop 208 does. Basically, it set a surcharge on certain income levels to raise $940 million dedicated to the needs that are showed here. We won't start seeing this money until tax returns are filed next April. So here's the method that Prop 208 voters approved to fund this dedicated fund. There's a 3.5% surcharge applied to taxable earnings over $250,000 if you're a single payer, or $500,000 if you are a married taxpayer. Okay. The surcharge only affects the top 1% of earners in the state, because those are the only people who fit into this category. Opponents worried that this would drive away rich folks in Arizona, but their worries were unfounded. The top 1% will still pay below the national average and less than in most states in the Southwest. Currently, without the surcharge, Arizona taxpayers pay an effective tax rate that is 34th in the country. With it, they will go up to 26th. This is without the 3 new tax bills. Okay. So it really it's not a big, I mean, it's a jump, but it's not as much as some of the opponents of Prop 208 thought. With this in mind, let's look at this 4.5% cap. It shields the top 1% from the effect of the surcharge. Before the recent legislative changes last month, those having taxable income more than the $250,000 as a single person or $500,000 as a couple would have paid about 8% on their taxable income above those threshold levels, assuming they were paying roughly the highest tax rate of 4.5% prior to Prop 208. For example, if a couple made $510,000 in taxable income, they would have $10,000 over the threshold. The new surcharge of 3.5% would have been applied to that $10,000 for an extra $350 in taxes to go to the dedicated education fund. And they would have been paying around $450 into the general fund based on the normal tax rate for the highest earners. The 4.5% cap changes that. Now, while continuing to pay the surcharge, because again, the surcharge is law, this couple would only pay 1% on taxes, not 4.5%, of their earnings above the thresholds. So in our example, the couple would still pay $350 to the Prop 308 fund, but only $100 versus $450 into the general fund on that $10,000 over the threshold. I know this can be a little confusing, but we can go through the math again later if there's a question. But essentially, this will skirt the intent of Prop 208 by shielding high earners from the impact of this surcharge. Of course, the rest of Arizonans would be paying 2.5% on all taxable income because of the flat tax. So the impact would be, they will be paying 2.5% flat income tax on earnings below their threshold, whether it's $250,000 or $500,000. They'll just pay 1% of income tax to the general fund on earnings above the threshold. The result for the general fund is a loss of $489 million. Now, the intent of Prop 208 was never to decrease the general fund, but rather to create this dedicated fund for public education. When this $489 million is combined with the $1.9 billion loss from the flat income tax, the loss to the general fund rises to 20%, or $2.4 billion, making the general fund pie even smaller. Arizona's will pay in the form of cuts in services. The third provision was called Senate Bill 1783, and it created a new filing category for business income, estates, and trusts, and it shelters this income for the rich. Now, you may remember hearing some comments about people with small businesses who were put their profit into their personal taxes instead of as a business income. This supposedly addresses that issue, but this way they won't have to pay the surcharge at all. So they have this new filing option on which the 2.5% flat tax will apply, and Prop 208 won't, because Prop 208, this tax position did not exist when Prop 208 was passed. Using our previous example of a married couple who had $510,000 in taxable income, they could possibly move all that extra $10,000 to this new category and pay $250 in taxes on it due to the new flat tax. The money would go to the general fund and nothing would go to the Prop 208 fund. This is a clear end run around the proposition and undermines the letter and intent of the new law by creating a legal means for the wealthy to shelter their income from the surcharge. The loss to Prop 208 funding is estimated to be around $300 million, or almost 30% of the total anticipated revenues. The cost of all three provisions is going to run to $2,689,000,000. That's billion with a B. With the general fund loss due on the flat tax of 1.9 billion, the cap causing a loss of 489 million more to the general fund, and the Prop 208 dedicated education fund losing around 300 million. Imagine the cuts necessary to balance the budget with this level of cuts. We think these numbers make it obvious why we need to get behind these referendums. But in addition to the astounding financial impact, this legislation undermines the will of the people. By law, the state legislature and the governor must honor citizens' initiatives when approved at the polls. They must listen to what the people are saying. These provisions would set a terrible precedent if allowed to stand. We must not allow them to get away with this flagrant violation of the Arizona Constitution. And there's one other reason we must oppose these tax provisions. This is a quote from Jim Wallace of Sojourners, who wrote this a few years ago. Any budget is a moral statement of priorities, whether it's a budget created by an individual, a family, a school, a city, or a nation. It tells us mathematically what areas, issues, things, or people are most important to the creators of that budget and which are least important. Who's most important and least important when you look at these laws? The flat tax does not live up to the values of social justice for all because it benefits the rich at the expense of everyone else. We've been told for years that there isn't enough money for programs to help those in need, but everyone wants good roads, good schools, enough police and firefighters, libraries, parks, reliable sewers, dependable state services, and more. We believe that the state should invest in human capital. These huge tax cuts just passed will not allow these investments. So now we'd like to talk a little bit about what you've just learned and to answer more questions. Kate?
All right, I'll have you stop screen sharing again there. And let's stretch again. A lot of information.
Yeah.
Everybody put one hand like this and one hand like this and push with both of them. And now do it the other way. Oh yeah. Okay. So let's go to the chat. And if you have questions about the content, please throw them in there. But I'd just like to drive home the impact of a $2.689 billion cut to the general fund. And that is cutting not just education, but all state services, all state functions. Mm-hmm. So let's go to the chat and brainstorm things that will be cut. What are things that the state funds that will be cut? For example, in the areas of healthcare or infrastructure or education or all of those things that state money goes to. Mm.
Schools, education.
Yep. We've got roads, education, park maintenance, arts funding, recreation areas and parks raising their fees, which mean fewer people can go. Gina says healthcare access. Yeah. Somebody yesterday shared a story. Who was it that shared that story? Lizzie says emergency services, about how difficult it is if you're on access or Medicaid, how difficult it is to get the care that you need already. And as that funding dries up, the system is going to be even less funded. People are going to be cut from the rolls. It's, you know, a public health crisis, especially on the heels of a pandemic. After school programming, transportation services, pushes for public Wi-Fi. Yep. Thinking about crumbling infrastructure, especially in rural areas, but also on highways. This is not the time to be cutting these budgets. Wildfire response, that falls on counties and cities, a lot of those costs. And so that's all gonna get cut. All the administrative roles that help all of the other programs happen, those are gonna be cut. It's catastrophic. It will bankrupt the state in a number of years. Robin asks, has the general fund always been around? Yes. It's the main, it's the pie that all of the state funded things come out of. All the tax money goes in there and then it's divvied up. Yeah. Okay, great. So now let's make it a little bit more personal. We're going to go into breakouts for about 5 minutes. I'm just going to divvy everybody up. And the question is, how is this going to impact you personally? How is it going to impact our students? And how is it going to impact our community? I'll put that in the chat. So get the breakout rooms going here. I'm just going to make 2. Okay. There we go. Sorry. I didn't know if you guys wanted to be in breakouts. Yeah, okay, I'll put you back. I think you can do it. And when you click on breakouts, it should give you an option to go back in. I'm gonna try that. Did that work? You're muted, Judy.
I'm just trying to see if it says not joined right now. I'm going to hit join and yes.
All right, so what'd you talk about? Shout them out.
Everybody got muted, so I think.
If you're feeling shy, you can
One
put
of
it in the
ours.
chat.
We talked about school tuition being tied to funding.
What are we gonna do about it?
We're
What a
gonna
great
talk about
question.
We have an answer.
What a great segue. Did anything that you really want to share that came out?
I was blown away by the statistics, the numbers, then the concerns of everybody. And yes, as human beings, we have contacts with other people. What's the procedure now? There's got to be a plan that I don't know about, but you do.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
it.
I think maybe we should move right to that.
Let's get going. Okay.
Okay.
So we still have Judy. Okay, good.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, let's see.
Press escape or double.
This is the what can we do slide.
Yes, well, let's take a look at that. What can we do? Well, what can we do to overturn the harmful legislation? By joining together to fight against these three provisions, we can defeat them and force the legislature to listen to us. We've done this before and we can do it again. We collected enough signatures for Red for Ed, and in 2020 Prop 208 Invest in Ed, we also fought for a referendum that defeated Prop 305, which invalidated the expansion of school vouchers. Now, 3 petitions are needed this time because each provision was contained in a different bill. Referendums can only be applied to one bill at a time. The people have the power to pass a referendum to undo legislation we disagree with. We have the power to show our state legislators that we disagree, and they need to listen to us. Now, Kate's going to take you through the petition circulation process. Kate?
All right.
And let me stop that. There we go.
Okay. So there are a lot of ways to plug in depending on your comfort level with gathering signatures. So the first and most important one is to sign the petitions. We've got them at the front desk of Literacy Connect, so you can sign them when you're there in the office. The next most the next most active role that you can take is to actually gather signatures. And I know a lot of you gathered signatures for Prop 208. You are old hands, you know the drill, but we're gonna go through the process again today. And then another thing that you can do to help is to donate to the Invest in AZ Now campaign. It's costing significantly more this time around, and you'll see why when we get to the petition part. So Aaron and Lupita are all ready to go. They know how to sign petitions out to you. They can walk you through this training again. So if you don't remember it all today, that's all right, because Lupita and Aaron can help you with that. And then Rhiannon, awesome Rhiannon, is going to be our notary. Once your signature page is full, you can bring it to Rhiannon on Thursdays from 10 to 4, and she will notarize it and we'll get it back to the campaign. So we're going to go through how to gather signatures. And even if you don't plan to gather signatures, this part is important so that you can see how difficult the legislature has made it on purpose to make it really difficult for citizens to pass initiatives or referendum, even though that's a right guaranteed in the Arizona Constitution. So some basics. You must be a citizen, 18 years of age and eligible to vote. You don't have to be registered to vote to gather signatures. You'll see, oh gosh, I should have grabbed mine. You'll see that there is a staple. One second, let me go grab them. BRB, talk amongst yourselves.
I think what Kate's going to show you is the flat tax proposal in particular is a very, very long law, and referendums have to have petitions attached to the actual law. So it's a pretty hefty package that she's about to show you.
So your petition, let me turn off my blurring. So the petition, the law is that the full text of the law must be stapled to every petition page. And this is why the campaign is so much more expensive this time, because the flat text one is 35 pages front to back. So it's costing like exponentially more for the campaign to print petition pages. So this, you cannot remove this staple, even though it's annoying. The full thing has to be there. You'll see there's a box that says volunteer. You'll check that, and then you'll write Pima and Pima. Okay. So again, you'll when you get your petitions, you'll see all this. This is just an overview. We're going to watch a short video from Save Our Schools, Arizona. I happen to have my Save Our Schools shirt on today. And this is going to walk you through the basics of it. Let me get that. It's about 5 minutes.
Yeah, counts. Follow these 4 simple steps. Step 1, check your voter registration status. Anyone can circulate petitions in Arizona as long as they're qualified to register to vote. So you need to be a U.S. citizen, at least 18 years old, and you must be able to write and sign your name. You cannot be a convicted felon, and if you're not a resident of Arizona, please contact us. Step 2, grab a clipboard, your blue or black ballpoint pen, and an official petition. Step 3, make sure the petition is securely stapled to the sheets containing the text of the referendum provided to you with the official petition. Make sure they stay attached at all times. If the petition is detached from the stapled sheets, none of the signatures on that page will count, and even reattached sheets can be disqualified. Step 4, people who sign the petition must use a black or blue ballpoint pen. Signatures written in marker, pencil, Sharpie, or even a different color will be disqualified. Getting signatures. As a circulator, your job isn't just to get signatures, but to get signatures that count. Think neat and complete with every single signature. Here's what all circulators need to know. Only signatures of registered Arizona voters count toward our goal of 76,000. So be sure to ask each person you approach, are you a registered voter in Arizona? Also,
sorry, this video is from 2018, so that's why the numbers are a little bit off.
So, each petition is limited to 1 county, and all signers on your petition must be registered in the county listed on the petition. So be sure to ask, are you registered in Maricopa County? Or are you registered in Pima County? And so on. For the signature to count, each line must be filled out neatly and completely only by the signer. Circulators may not fill in any information for your signers. Missing information, like a city or a date, is grounds for rejection of a petition signature. Here's a petition. On a practice page, try signing your own signature to see how difficult it can be to fit your full name inside the small box. Signers must use their actual physical address. A signature accompanied by a P.O. box won't count. And don't rush. Ask your signers to be neat and complete when they sign. Remind them to use their full legal signature that matches their voter ID and double check to make sure each box is filled out completely. But watch out, show your signers that the zip code comes before the city and remind them not to abbreviate the city name. If the information is entered in a wrong box or your signer makes a mistake, just cross out that line and ask your signer to start over on a new line. The petition sheets you carry are your responsibility, and you must personally witness each signer signing his or her name and completing all of the entries on the petition. Do not leave the petition sheets unaccompanied at any time. And finally, be sure to thank your signers for exercising their constitutional right to put a referendum on the 2018 Arizona ballot to save our schools and demand that our elected officials make public education a priority. Ready to turn in your petitions?
We'll save the ready to turn in your petitions for later when you'll get those to Rhiannon. Questions about all that?
Question about the pages. So on the pages that we just got, I think I mentioned yesterday, they say put in the zip code and post office code. Is a signature going to be invalid if it doesn't have those extra 4 numbers at the end of the zip code?
No, just the zip code.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember back with Red for Ed a couple of years ago when we did a lot of publicity, getting people to, be aware. Oh, gee, this is going to happen. These people are doing it. What kind of publicity is going to be out there now for, hey, there's a petition you got to sign? How are they going to know about this?
We're going to talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Great question. So you may be wondering, go ahead, Gina.
Right. What happens if that first page like falls off? Do we need to find all those people again and get them to sign another petition because we can't staple it again?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They really don't want, I had this happen with this petition gatherer. That wasn't the issue, but somebody who had macular degeneration and could not sign in the box. And so her signature covered a couple of different lines and she didn't notice it. So now the petition's okay, but that person can't sign a petition because she has no way to sign because she can't see. I mean, this is the level of details. You cannot cross over any of those lines.
And the other thing to consider is that they don't check all of the signature pages. They actually only check 20% of them and then extrapolate that accuracy percentage to all of them. Yeah. So we need all of the pages to be as neat and complete as possible because we don't know which ones are going to get checked.
Mm-hmm. If someone, I think I remember seeing this when I was like signing previously, but say someone signs and their signature does go over multiple lines, do you have to start on and then you go to the next house? Do you have to start on like a new page? Can you like move them down just past the signature or whatever?
If somebody gets wild, you just say, oops, sorry, you went outside the lines, however you want to say it, and then move them down to the next line.
Yeah.
It does not invalidate the whole page.
Yeah. But unfortunately, in her case, she can't sign any way other than what she signs. So.
Same, I had that with a gentleman with Parkinson's.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So it can't be legal, but it's what we're working with right now.
Yeah.
So you may be wondering how to talk about this. So here's a sample script. And one of the things I'm going to email you is the fabulous messaging toolkit that Gina made that includes a bunch of sample scripts and talking points. So it sounds like this. Hey, I'm a local person, whatever you are, volunteering for Invest in Arizona. I'm really worried about the lack of education funding in Arizona, and the Arizona legislature recently cut even more funding, giving it away to the wealthy. They undid Prop 208. Will you sign these petitions to put this funding on the 2022 ballot? I know it's a lot to sign all 3, but unfortunately the governor and the majority party leaders in Arizona split this into 3 bills. So we have to do 3 times the work to make things right for Arizonans.
Oh, yeah.
I can't see your faces while I'm screen sharing, so hope everybody's good. So we covered some of these already. If a signer makes a mistake, no problem, go down to the next line. Don't remove the front page. Don't sign your own petition. And you need to keep your eye on your petition at all times. So when we have them at the front desk, Lupita is going to keep eagle eyes on them or stash them away where someone can't tamper with them. Signers must sign a petition that matches the county where they're registered to vote. So if they're living in Pima County, but they're registered in Maricopa, then they need to sign a Maricopa page. You cannot edit what a signer has written. Signers cannot abbreviate the city. And signers cannot use ditto marks. And in the same vein, somebody couldn't sign for like John and Mary, so-and-so. It would need to be one for John and one for Mary. And then, so for those of us who are, either if we're doing this at an LC event or if we are wearing LC garb, because of 501c3 regulations, we need to be nonpartisan, and that includes social media. This issue might bleed into discussion of candidates, but what we can say is we can recommend another organization's ranking of candidates. For example, Arizona Education Association always does legislative scorecards on legislators, so you can see how they voted on education issues. We can recommend something like that, but we can't say anything about candidates. And it's going to be important to focus on the issues because this really is a nonpartisan issue. Politics have been injected into it, but this concerns the health and future of our state, and that's nonpartisan. For volunteers watching, it could be helpful for you to be nonpartisan as well, because we're in a very fractured time and any kind of partisan speech just sends people into their corners. It's best to focus on shared values and shared concerns, which, you know, this is going to impact everybody. Mm-hmm. So when you check out petitions from the front desk or from me at LC, you're going to get a reminder of the do's and don'ts. You're going to get handouts with a lovely explainer document from Pima County Interfaith. It's awesome. You're going to get talking points and scripts. You'll get the actual petition pages. You'll get the signature guards that help stay in the tiny lines. And we have palm cards, which are nice little info cards that you can give people to take. I'm going to send, well, let me stop sharing here. Questions. We're going to take good care of you. We're not just going to shove you out there.
You can turn in like packets that aren't finished, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
If it's got one signature on it, notarize it and turn it in. And if you are planning to go to Maricopa or Santa Cruz County or wherever, take another petition page and you can make a Maricopa one. So then if somebody's from Maricopa, you've got that page that they can sign. So I'm going to send you a follow-up email that includes the communication toolkit. And this is super important because, as Sonia asked, last time we had a lot of lead time. There was a lot of energy around Red for Ed and the walkout. Everybody knew about it. Nobody really knows this is going on.
Oh, we know.
And when people find out, they're generally furious, but nobody knows it's going on. So it's going to be very, very important to spread the word. And that's the purpose of the communication toolkit. Share it quickly here. So we need you to be sharing on social media as often as possible. Send emails to friends and family with this information. Let them know what's going on. Text your friends. Tell everybody you know about this. And in this toolkit, you'll see that we have, if your buddies don't want to come to Literacy Connects, Here we have a updated, this is updated every week of locations where you can sign or get notarized. This one is for statewide. Gina has drafted sample social media posts, or you could send these as text to friends. So you can just copy and paste this into your social media and post. We have really cool infographics that Gina made. We have, this is that video we watched at the beginning. The hashtags are Red for Ed and Invest in AZ Now. So when you post on social media, you can use those hashtags. We've got more talking points, and then a ton of articles about what we're doing and why this is happening.
Good.
And then a little bit more background here. So share on social media, email your friends, share this toolkit with people. If your friends get fired up, give them this toolkit and then they can spread it further. So there is a network of organizations across the state that are working on this, but it's going to have to be super grassroots because it's a short time frame. We're not as well funded this time around, and it's high stakes.
There is
And if
one
there's
good.
something that you would, oh, sorry to interrupt. I was
going to
there's
say
something
there's one good thing though. Even though the time frame is very compressed, it's fewer signatures. So we need 118,000 signatures that are valid. Okay, so this is doable. It is doable because even though the time frame's compressed, it's less signatures, and we can get 118,000 valid signatures if we get like 150 or 200,000. And we got way more than that in the summertime, last summer in the pandemic. And we
during a pandemic. Yes, I have hope about this because it has been, I'm giving myself goosebumps. It has been so incredible to see how all of these grassroots groups have just hit the ground sprinting. Like, this is the third time we've done it. Everybody knows what to do, and we're just totally rocking already. So jump on board.
One thing that might be useful to understand too. So if we meet the criteria, this stops these bills. Nothing happens for the next year until the November 22 election.
Good.
Where we have to get out the vote to vote whichever way it is, yes or no. That'll be one of the tricky things to stop them from going into effect. But getting the 118,000 plus stops the impact, and Prop 208 will go into effect for next year's income. So just so that if people ask, well, what will this do? That's what it'll do. And it gives people to get even more time to get educated. Or in the past, the legislature actually changed some laws so it didn't draw a particular party's people to the polls.
Yeah. So one other thing to consider, I know we're over time, I'm going to wrap this up by 1:15, is that there are actually 9 petitions circulating. There are 6 that are referendum. So there's these 3. There are 3 bad voting rights laws that are also gathering signatures. There's the Fight for 15, and then there's a couple more that I don't remember.
Well, dark money is not
dark money. Yeah, dark money, and then there's
the other one is I think the local county one for immigration.
Oh yeah, Justice for All. Pima County Justice for All.
That's the other one.
So basically, if someone puts a petition in front of you, sign it. Because if you've already signed it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt. So just sign them all.
And tell people that if they, well, I think I already signed the petition. We'll go ahead and sign again because it may have been a different petition.
Yep.
And I think it's really important, particularly, the reason we're focusing on the tax laws as opposed to the other egregious things that were passed by the legislature. And there were some very bad ones related to what teachers could say and, teacher gag stuff and all of that. But we're focusing on these tax ones because the tax ones will affect everybody. And because once tax cuts are passed and implemented, you cannot turn them around. Even if you elect a different majority in the House and the Senate, you'd have to elect an overwhelming majority to have any way to impact tax cuts. So that's why these are probably more important than anything we've done in the past.
Okay, last thing, let's go to the chat and tell us, how are you going to help? Are you going to sign? Are you going to gather signatures? Are you going to donate? Are you going to tell your friends? Are you going to post on social media? What are you planning to do?
You just said 5 things.
Yep. Which ones are you going to do?
How about all 5?
Okay, great.
I mean, you know, you got it. If you care about this, we do.
Victoria says all of them. Gina says gather signatures and advocate for awareness. All those things. Great. Gather signatures, post on social media. Ooh. Kate says, can you share some point a video of talking points from the other side? It would help me, I think, have a better idea of how to be more passionate about our movement. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I could probably do that. It'll make me really mad. But Erin's going to sign and gather signatures at the office and get everybody you know to sign. Yes. The other thing is that I can do this training for other groups. So if you are part of other groups in the community, let me know and I'll be happy to do it for a group of any size.
And the same with us, for Pima County
Yep.
Interfaith is doing. We're gonna do another one of our general trainings community-wide on August 4th at 7 p.m.
Oh,
So
great.
if you've got groups of circulators or neighbors or friends that you need, that need to see this to get, the challenge here is this is the more complicated issue because it's taxes and they've done 3 different things. So we're going to do this again on August 4th at 7 p.m. and I'll be putting that information. I'll get that information to Kate. And, we're going to be putting out on social media the links to register for that. So please feel free to come to that training. Again, it'll be very similar to this. It's not as customized as this was for Literacy Connects, but it's generally applicable. So
We
Okay,
also
one
will
last-
probably put a link to this training that Kate just did in the toolkit. So if someone can't attend one, they can always watch this recording and learn more. And we are, just everyone is going to be publicizing that you can get your petitions here. It's not just like a need to know thing.
Yeah.
We'll tell people that.
The other thing, if you're watching at home and you need this toolkit, you're not going to get my follow-up email. You can call the Literacy Connects office at 882-8006 or email me at caveandrukel@literacyconnects.org. And we're way over. So I want to respect your time. What was it, Judy?
I was just going to say, send Leah and I the same emails you're sending
Okay, sure.
out, would you?
Yeah.
I will. So thank you so much for your attention and your energy. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm always excited to work at Literacy Connects, but Literacy Connects supportive advocacy is just really inspiring and really so important to this community. So thank you, everybody. Thanks to Judy and Leah. Great collaboration with you guys. So have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
See you at church, Sonia.